Aloha, everyone, and welcome. Before we get started, just a word on why we are here. This first presentation of the webinar is for the clubs and districts from District 5000, the Rotary Club of Delhi South Metropolitan and District 3011, the Rotary Club of Nara East, and District 5000, District 2650 Rotarians in Japan, uh, and the Rotary Club of Kihei Wailea. All of the stakeholders who have supported Global Grant 2120603 to improve livelihoods for Delhi's slum dwellers in the aftermath of COVID-19. Later this month, I will be presenting it during District 5000 training in Global Grants, and the webinar will also be posted in the Global Grants page of the District 5000 website and also on the Peace Builder Committee page. It will also be submitted to the Institute for Economics and Peace Ambassador Program to fulfill the candidate presentation requirement. One of my goals in this presentation is to demonstrate that the project can be a prototype global grant in the Rotary Peace and Conflict area of focus, especially in the context of the Institute of Economics and Peace Positive Peace Framework, the 8 pillars of positive peace. The global grant is a response to the critical disruption of livelihoods in Kusumpur Pihari, one of the largest slums in Delhi. Their goal is to build back better by mobilizing collective awareness of government training programs to which they are entitled, and to prepare residents, especially young people and women, to take advantage of the job placement programs offered by the government. The project further seeks to leverage the unique position of the Rotary Club of Delhi South Metropolitan in the community to establish a clean interface between slum residents and government agencies to secure access to these programs and other services to which they are entitled. Finally, the grant also provides funding for our cooperating partner to explore replication of the project in other informal settlements in Delhi and scaling to national level centers of excellence. We plan to submit the larger project for a program of scale grant in the next Rotary year. We have completed the community assessment. The grant has been submitted and is under review, and we will be meeting with the grants manager and the area focus manager at the end of this month to discuss the grant and its goals and monitoring and evaluation. Uh, as an overview, projects aimed at poverty reduction and service delivery improvement in informal settlements depend critically on the slum dwellers' own collective agency. A fair representation of the poor by community leaders and community-based organizations, and the potential and interests of both poor men and women to organize proactively to collective action. The Rotary Club of Delhi South Metropolitan has a proven track record of working across caste, gender, patronage, and political divisions to mobilize positive community action. A word on why we are here. Rotary's vision statement. Together, we see a world where people unite and take action to create lasting change across the globe in our communities and in ourselves. So the global grant, building livelihoods in post-COVID-19 Kusumpur Pahari, the challenge of inclusion in a Delhi slum. So first of all, we want to leverage the Rotary Club of Delhi South Metropolitan's experience in navigating among community members, community leaders, All India Democratic Women's Association, the lower level bureaucracy workers in the Delhi Development Authority, the Delhi Urban Shelter Improvement Board in Kusumpur Pihari to establish clean interfaces between slum residents and government agencies and the skill enhancement centers. Second, we want to establish centers of excellence for vocational training based on skills assessment matched with priority skills established through community surveys and aligned with the Skill India mission of the Ministry of Skill Development and Entrepreneurship, uh, its model training centers, and the India International Skills Centers. And I'll have something more to say about those agencies later on. Number three is to identify the livelihood disruptions resulting from COVID-19 that need urgent attention and intervention. We have done that with our community needs assessment, and I'll be going over that in some detail in a moment. And finally, we want to establish channels of access and a clear window to Government of India programs through awareness building, Rotary advocacy and intermediation, and active involvement of NGO partners. We want to provide training on digital platforms to prepare slum residents for access to government services. Let me address the areas of focus issues. As I've said, I want to demonstrate that this can be a prototype global grant in the peace and conflict resolution area of focus, and it works on this criteria. Group activities, including workshops, training, and other programs that support peace leadership and education, positive peace, and community integration of vulnerable populations. And then also the legal, psychological, social, and rehabilitative services that help to integrate vulnerable populations into society. This grant has also been described as a community economic and development grant and is based on this criteria, offering training related to community economic development, including entrepreneurship, community leadership, vocational skills, and financial literacy. So basically, uh, this grant bridges two areas of focus. I would like to emphasize the peace and conflict area of focus. Uh, in terms of having the grant approved, I will accept either one of them or both. Um, I'll discuss the monitoring and evaluation that would be involved in the peace and conflict resolution area in a moment. Um, Community needs assessment, which we've already completed, examines the impact of COVID and the lockdown on the lives of migrant workers through the lenses of income, expenditure, migration patterns, and health and nutrition indicators. We've also carried out skill mapping of the community and evaluation of the existing skills enhancement programs and assess the demand for skill promotion. Uh, During the survey for the community needs assessment, our methodology included the following. First of all, identification of survey informants. We selected 52 community members of Kusumpur Pahari, including the local Pradhan, who is the community leader. He is an informal interface between government services, politicians, community-based organizations, and NGOs. We also elected 11 key informants from the community. These are self-help group leaders, community-based organization leaders, uh, other leaders in the community, and also leaders of the women's groups. And we also elected 5 alternates. Uh, the surveys uh, were operated in 3 ways. First of all, we used computer-assisted personal interviews developed by our survey company. We also had managed focus group discussions with the key informants. There were 4 focus groups of 3 people only, 1 with women only, and 1 with seniors only. And finally, we had in-depth interviews, 16 with stakeholders, first of them 12 social influencers and political leaders, NGO activists, frontline health workers, government workers, and four interviews with members of the Rotary Club of Delhi South Metropolitan. And finally, we use secondary data based on government housing and infrastructure survey data, household surveys, NGO reports, and available government and NGO skills development programs. Um, the community needs assessment. Okay, the profile of our interviewees. Here are the age groups. 50% of them were relatively young, 25 to 40. We had a very small group from the 18 to 25-year-olds. 33% were 40 to 55, so fairly far along in their careers. And then 15% from the seniors group. 87% of our interviewees were men. That reflects the employment structure of the slum. 13% were female. This 13%, the female interviewees, were closely connected to the Rotary Club of Delhi South Metropolitan through our ongoing programs. Um, the employment profile, 56% of them actually had contract working arrangements before COVID-19. Many of them have lost those contracts during the pandemic. 23% are wage workers, 19% are casual. They're, they work when they can. They work in response uh, to recruitment by work gangs, people like that, and 23% were wage. The actual occupation, uh, most of them were involved in housekeeping, sweeping, janitorial activities, mostly in retail malls that are very close by. Uh, Kusumpur Pihari is a large slum, but it's immediately adjacent to one of the poshest uh, shopping and residential districts of Delhi. So 12 uh, out of the total pool, 56% of them were employed by malls, shopping malls in that posh area. Uh, Daily casual workers, that was a fairly small group. 23% of them were wage workers. Uh, they were office helpers, drivers, gardeners. A great many of them were gardeners in residential developments. Caste is an issue in Kusumpur Pihani. Uh, a lot of these people immigrated in the 60s, so they're their second and third generation. Haryana, Rajasthan, Uttar Pradesh, these are all adjacent to the main area of Delhi metropolitan area. But you can see the caste structure here. Most of them are either in lower castes or actually in scheduled castes, so-called scheduled castes. They're involved in things like scavenging, pig breeding, leather tanning. All of these are basically disdained, stigmatized castes. Uh, each one of them has its own caste structure, caste representation, but these are mostly social organizations and are not uh, formally involved with the political structure of the slum or with the uh, community-based organizations. But there are strong caste ties, and there are also strong hometown barriers to good relations between neighbors. The community needs assessment. 71% of our interviewees, 37, suffered a drastic reduction in income during the lockdown. 40 of the 52 respondents reported that they had lost their jobs, at least for some period. 12 were able to continue working, but had substantially reduced wages and working hours. 89%, 47, reported reduced expenditures on their own during the lockdown. And of the 47, however, nobody had taken a loan to sustain their livelihoods. Uh, Most of the borrowing that took place with the informal caste organizations, and these are an informal savings plan that everybody participates in. But there were no formal loans taken by the community residents. 13 of the respondents reported to have reduced their remittance to hometowns. This is a pretty big jolt to the community because a lot of the families they left behind depend on them for remittances from the big city. Um, the community needs assessment, kind of a summary. Uh, 48 of the 52 received some relief from government programs. 77% lost jobs, 90% reduced their expenditures, and 71% had to reduce their expenditures on things like education, food, clothing, care for elderly dependents. So 25 of the respondents received some unemployment relief from government agencies, but none had received help from NGOs. One of the patterns that was quite evident during the COVID-19 pandemic was slum dwellers going back to their hometowns, seeking work or seeking sustenance, uh, some way to keep themselves going. Uh, 11 of them had done this, 11 of the interviewees, and most of them had to come back to consume Purpihari. And in most cases, this involved a foot traffic of several hundred kilometers both ways. So it was a substantial hardship for the slum residents. Some of the comments, uh, it's really bad, especially after Corona. A lot of people have left and many have lost their jobs. There is almost no income. Uh, One of the in-depth interviewees, uh, community-based organization leader, said income was massively affected. 90% of people didn't get salaries. Uh, Government policy has not changed. It passed around a circular that said it's entirely up to the employer if they would like to give salaries or not, and no one can sue them in court. So most of the people did not get salaries. Another community-based leaders and secondary resources said that one of the biggest reverse migrations of recent times occurred during the pandemic. People lost their employment, they faced impossible conditions, so they traversed all the way back to their home village, only to find the conditions were even worse there. With transportation in disarray, they often had to walk back hundreds of kilometers to return to the slum. Some other examples of what happened during the pandemic: 42% saw an increase in domestic violence. 48% saw a deterioration in mental health conditions. 65% an increase in family bickering. 67% an increase in alcoholism. 69% an increase in tobacco use. Um, Not surprising given the circumstances. So now, the survey of skills and existing skills, what would these people like and what do they need to gain better employment? Only 3 of them said that introduction to ITI would help their chances. We think that this is probably an underestimation. A lot of the better jobs that are available are in retail or in the hotel industry. We're not talking about major computer skills here, coding or that kind of thing. We're talking about the ability to use basic programs set up by the retail operations in hotels. Uh, Fairly simple to use, but you have to be able to turn on the computer to log in, to know how to navigate with a mouse. These are all basic skills that we believe the slum dwellers need if they're going to find better employment. A lot of them identified spoken English, and this is this is an issue. For most of these people, English is the third or fourth language. Uh, they are not fluent. They are certainly not fluent in reading, but we're hoping that our skills development classes, preparation for the skills development centers will help them get into the centers, and then that they'll be able to do more training once they get into a government program. 25% identify computer skills as something they need. This is in line with what we expect. Uh, we believe that those skills are absolutely essential for the slum dwellers to get ahead. There is a category that in India is called beauty culture. This is related to all kinds of things, uh, sewing, uh, hand stitching, beauty parlors, fashion design, uh, drafting, all sorts of things that are considered to be specialties for women. So we have identified that as a skill that a lot of women want. I want to emphasize that we will offer this as an additional training, not a substitute for the basic training that we're describing uh, for our voluntary programs. Now, here is a critical slide, a critical finding of our community needs development. The question was very simple. Do you know about government or NGO sponsored skills enhancement programs? And we also included in this question job placement programs. And the answer was overwhelming. 90% of the slum dwellers do not know about programs to which they are entitled. Uh, and this is indicative of the government's attitude. There is absolutely there's no effort to introduce slum dwellers to these programs, to make it known that they are available. And we see this as the role of the global grant to create this community awareness of the program and to open opportunities for people to take advantage of them. So this is our key outcome for the Kasumpur Pahari residents to gain access to sustainable employment through appropriate skill development and market linkage provisions. So the participation of the pradhans, the community leaders, the civil society organizations, the community-based organizations, NGOs, in awareness building and providing links to Government of India and NGO skill development and training opportunities. Uh, our cooperating organization is the Research Triangle Institute Global India, which will offer video-based training materials. Uh, this will involve an introduction to the government training portals and also training in meeting the qualification requirements for these programs. And secondly, logistics training and direct assistance in meeting the qualification requirements for entry. This has been one of the big stumbling blocks. Um, and we'll get to that in just a moment. Um, so our staff will pilot the Center of Excellence, which will provide video-based training materials and the introduction to the training portals and also primers in the qualification requirements. We'll also offer logistics training and direct assistance in meeting qualification requirements for entry, including transportation, daycare, translation and interpretation services, and interview assistance, as far as accompanying people to the interviews and helping them if they get in trouble. Uh, and the second aspect of the grant is to explore the replication and scaling opportunities and feasibility in Delhi. So we'll compile data on 3 types of unplanned communities in Delhi. There are 3 of 7 types comprising almost half of Delhi's population. One of them is the so-called Juggi Jopri clusters, JTCs. Uh, These are the real slums, the most common slums in Delhi, and Kasumpur Pahari is the largest in Delhi. Uh, Unauthorized colonies. This is another type of slums. Uh, Kasumpur Pahari is right in the middle of Delhi in the southwest. It is next to one of the poshest uh, local shopping and residential centers, and finally resettlement colonies. And these are the colonies that are set up. They are authorized by the government. They're set up on the periphery of Delhi, and they are so-called temporary resettlement camps. And what this involves is moving the slum residents to one of these resettlement centers while the plot where the slum were situated is redeveloped, usually as a high-rise commercial building or residential building, and then a very small section of high-rise apartments, uh, of course, of much lower quality for the slum dwellers to move back into. Um, there is often a lag of 2 to 3 years before these developments are finished. And so the resettlement camps have become a type of semi-permanent settlement on the outskirts of Delhi, and they are essentially slums. Um, so we won't be talking about those in relation to Kasumpur Pahari, but that may be in the slums future. So it's worth looking at those. Um, as far as the immediate grant that we're working on, getting the Kasumpur Pahari slum residents into these programs, the first thing for us to do is for our cooperating partner to make contact with the relevant officials across all of the agencies involved in getting people uh, into these programs. Uh, the underlying entity that we have to make contact with is the Delhi Development Authority, which is the landowning agency for the area that is occupied by Kasumpur Pahari. Uh, we also need to make contact with the Delhi Urban Shelter Improvement Board, DUSIB, and the Ministry of Skill Development and Entrepreneurship. They run the programs that we're trying to get people into. And there are basically a number of programs that are available. The first is the Skill India mission. It is state of the art. It is computer based. It's aspirational. They are aspirational model training centers in every district of India. Our program will fit into this program, which is called PMKK. It covers all age groups, both genders, all castes. It is formally available to all slum dwellers in Delhi, but it is not widely publicized amongst them. There is no awareness building program. The second type of program is actually aimed more at young people or younger people. It is called Pradhan Mantri Kaushal Vikas Yojana, PNKVY, and it is a standardized certification process. It recognizes existing skills, and it also is a registry of skills, which is all important because this is the one that actually uh, produces the certifications that people can take with them to job interviews. They also run the job placement service, and this is absolutely, of course, essential. The National Apprenticeship Promotion Scheme, this of course is aimed mostly at younger slum dwellers. It provides financial incentives, very limited and only for qualified individuals. It also provides technology, advocacy support, and meeting job placement services. One of the more interesting ones is the India International Skill Centers, IISCs. These are skill training programs, basically for young people who are seeking temporary immigration to Dubai, to Malaysia, to other areas of India. Uh, and it's an orientation program and it certifies them for out migration. Also helps them find jobs, for example, in Dubai, which is one of the most popular destinations. Uh, Here's an example of the uh, the website for the Pradhan Mantri Kaushal Vikas Yojana program. This is the most common one, the India Skill Center for Youth. Uh, it aims at a relatively small part of our slum, but these are the people that, currently unemployed, long-term unemployment, and they are even more disadvantaged because of COVID-19. So why this slum and why Rotary? The Rotary Club of Delhi South Metropolitan is located in an area very close to the slums. The Rotary Club of Delhi has been active in the slum for more than 25 years. It started with the polio eradication drives, but they also in the 1980s worked with residents to repair the hand pumps on the government-run tube wells. They have provided daycare centers for women who are working, also preschool. They have done some remedial classes, some individual tutoring and counseling for high school students. They've done computer and mobile device training for boys and girls. They actually ran a homeopathic clinic with OTC drugstore so that people could get access to basic medications. And this is sort of specialty beauty culture classes for women, design, embroidery, stitching, and machine sewing. And it was actually interesting because they did a small district grant, which gave sewing machines to all of the girls and women who completed the sewing class. So basically, the Rotary Club of Delhi South Metropolitan has a very long history and has established a level of trust in the community based on their activities in polio eradication and also, delivering services with no strings attached to the local people in the slum. I wanted to come back to this critical slide. We've examined the government programs, the programs that we can offer. Uh, and again, 98% of the people in the slums have no idea that these programs exist and that they have rights to them, even that they have rights to the city. So that's one of the goals of our global grant. One of the problems and the reason for our need to engage with these government agencies at the level of the club and also our cooperating partner is that in order to even participate in these programs, uh, the slum dwellers first have to establish their identity as citizens and their right to access these programs. Everyone is required in order to apply for these programs to have a unique identification number. This is a biomedical identification number. It's based on optical scanning and fingerprinting. Everybody has to have one. They also need to have an ID card. These have to be submitted for 3 different years. And they have various dates that are the cutoff dates. And then they may also need additional certificates and affidavits if they are in scheduled castes, which most of these people do, are, and, or if they're physically handicapped. And the interesting thing here is that the government does not make this easy. The documents can be submitted online, so we can help them with that. But in a lot of cases, the applicants have to appear in person. And it's very interesting. Often the Pradhan's authority is based on his willingness to get together self-help groups of slum dwellers, load them up into what they call a tempo van, and take them physically to the government office and help them sign up for these programs. They can also help with document access, that they can also help them collect the documents they need in order to be certified. The Rotary Club has also been involved in this process. And this is one of the goals of the grant, is to actually make sure that all of the residents are registered for these programs. So their identity, they have an identity established with the government programs. Uh, why the Rotary Club of Delhi South Metropolitan? To replete, they have a long track record of working across caste, gender, patronage systems, and political divisions to mobilize community action. Uh, Also, the director of our cooperating partner, the Research Triangle Institute, India, uh, is a member of the Rotary Club of Delhi South Metropolitan. And there is sort of an apparent conflict of interest there, but he is not involved in the finance, in the monitoring or evaluation of the program, or any of the financial oversight of the project, which will be carried out by the primary contact and the Global Grant Committee. Uh, the other important civil society organization and NGOs that we'll be working with, one of them is the All India Democratic Women's Association. They actually lead a community of women within the JJC that meets regularly to discuss livelihood issue and run educational programs and programs on maternal health. We have worked with them before, so they will be a key player in the grant going forward, especially in the awareness development aspects of the grant. There is a group called Kusumpur Ekta Manch. This is a group of residents opposing government development plans for the JJC, and they are connected to the political parties that are currently in power in the government of India. Um, we'll also be in touch with the Center for Advocacy and Research, Action India, the Bharat Foundation, Azad Foundation, Center for Urban and Regional Excellence, and the Cities of Delhi Project, which is run by the Center for Policy Research. A lot of the secondary research we have based our community assessment on is from that Center for Policy Research. So the global grant, as we've discussed before, basically operates on three tracks. And these tracks all work together. They're not happening in sequence, they're acting together. So the first track is preparing for success. That involves the registration procedures that I talked about before, but also training for success in the application and enrollment in the government programs. So our cooperating partner is going to run its own basic training in online access to the government and NGO skills development programs. It will help with the interviews. It will train in interview styles, CV writing, all of the things they need to get up and running in these government programs. We'll offer specialized courses in computer and mobile device applications, some training and refreshers in business English and Hindi, uh, and special courses for women in fashion, in beauty culture, retail and hospitality industry, special skills. Note again, these programs are in addition to the training above and only for the women who want them. Uh, we do not want to stereotype women in any way and put them in some sort of, women's only niche. Um, so the second track is opening the doors to opportunity, mass recruitment. We plan on screening candidates and coming up with 1,000 applicants, 400 of whom will be men and 600 women, and 30% overall will be young people. Uh, we will also do targeted recruitment of community leaders to cooperate in the program, including the pradhans, the community-based organizations, community self-help groups, NGOs, and politicians, anyone trusted in the community. We'll be looking to secure the cooperation of lower level officials in documentation offices, the relevant agencies. A lot of these lower level officials have been involved with the slum dwellers before, either in setting up water programs, delivery of water, in setting up public toilets, various aspects of sanitation. And finally, removing the logistical obstacles, including provision of daycare, transportation, accompanying candidates to interviews. So that's track 2. And number 3 is keeping the doors open. Ongoing training. While the candidates are working through the skills development programs, uh, we will be helping them with skills enhancement to reinforce their livelihood skills. Ongoing support to ensure that the logistics and the livelihood concerns do not interrupt training, and connecting them with employment opportunities. We want to make sure that when they're going through these programs, that they have access to the job placement services, especially the ones who, number 4, are introducing uh, training for foreign employment. Uh, this is a whole nother set of accreditations of, uh, applying for visas, applying for passports, all of the things involved in temporary immigration. So while these 3 tracks are conceptually distinct, after the initial recruitment, they will all be running simultaneously. Primary training occurs while candidates receive assistance with applications to government training systems, while the Rotary and cooperating partner assists with logistics and work on co-opting and briefing pradhans, CSOs, NGOs, government agencies responsible for ID and resident certification documentation. Also passports, visas, whatever it takes for the for the youth who want to immigrate. So this is from our training plan for global grants. It's kind of a very brief introduction, but it will include elementary training and skills, things like English, using cell phones, using communication devices, computers, some English, some Hindi, gender roles for working women, and for their spouses in households, health and hygiene, personality development, working on interviewing, communication and language training, quality training, etc. Here's some more. Knowledge of the market, knowledge of where to go for job planning, all of those things, including introductory computer training, device learning, basic financial management. Um, 2 large items in the grant are uh, for the other aspects of the grant, which number 1, replication and scaling, the feasibility of doing that in Delhi. The slums are very unique. There is one slum that is actually currently undergoing redevelopment, where most of the slum dwellers are performers. They perform uh, village plays, village skits, village uh, festivals, and they do it for communities from that area of India throughout Delhi. So others have different caste makeup, different hometown makeups. So is it feasible to scale this grant up? That's a good question. And also we're exploring scaling to national centers of excellence. In other words, applying this model across India in coordination with the government of India and the various agencies involved. So now I want to get into how this grant relates to the 8 pillars of positive peace of the Institute for Economics and Peace. Uh, I am actually in the 2021 cohort for the ambassador program. And so this is my presentation for that program. But let's go through the 8 pillars of uh, positive peace. And I will demonstrate how this grant helps to at least nudge Delhi in this direction, in the direction of this overall framework. Keep in mind that this framework is a system. So while we're discussing each one of the pillars individually, in the end, they all work together and across each other uh, in developing an overall program of positive peace. So first of all, let's look at the well-functioning government. Um, the inclusion of slum dwellers, slum residents in government documentation, in the UID program, in residence registry, in scheduled caste certification. All of those things will help to uh, make the government of India and the government of Delhi more inclusive, to include the slum dwellers and to recognize their right to the city. So further to that, the inclusion of slum residents in government and NGO skills enhancement and job placement programs, the reduction of patronage politics and predatory corruption, and the formalization of access to skill and job placement programs. Overall, we are attempting to restore a clean interface between the slum residents and the state and the government of Delhi during the implementation of this global grant. Looking at the free flow of information, uh, the initial phases of this grant will involve participatory awareness campaign, preparing for success courses and introducing the skill enhancement and job placement program, an increase in reliable data on the JJCs, the UACs, and the resettlement colonies. Uh, there are over 1,000 of these informal settlements in Delhi, but no reliable data on delivery of services. And then finally, the restoration of formal and informal interfaces between some slum residents and the state during implementation, the demonstration that slum dwellers with community-based organization and NGOs can access rights to services. This is a pretty good example of how awareness raising can take place. And this is an awareness drive by the Rotary Club of Jim Swasan. And this is for sanitation. But it is a way, as is showing how Rotary and Rotaract can actually get into these communities and raise awareness and rights to the city. And this took place in the Kasumpur Pahari slum in February of last year. Um, Good relations with neighbors. The implementation of this grant requires participation across caste, home province, gender, political affiliations, and community-based organization and NGO lines. The 1,000 people that we are targeting for inclusion in this grant come from each of those categories. So we are trying to break down the barriers between the different castes, the different genders, different hometown origins of the slum dwellers, and also relations with political parties, community-based organization, and the NGOs. Uh, Personal interventions by the Rotary Club and the cooperating organization and logistical support, negotiating with skills enhancement providers, and engaging with government agencies. And then Rotary's longstanding relationship with the Pradhans, with the Kusumpur Ekta Munch, with the women's group, with the women's political group, NGOs ensuring respect for their roles in awareness building and advocacy. And finally, 600 of the participants are women. And we will have classes on family roles after women go to work or establishes businesses of their own. Acceptance of the rights of others. Implementation of this grant, again, it requires participation across caste, home province, gender, politics, CBO, and NGO lines. It's based on Rotary diversity, equity, and inclusion principles. And we are advocating right to services and rights to the city discourse and challenging the slums as nuisance and the mindset of the courts, the DDA, the DUSIB. We are also leveraging Rotary's longstanding relations with Pradhans, the Sumpur Ekta Manch, the women's group, the NGOs to ensure respect for their roles and then 600 of the participants are women. Uh, Respect for the rights of others. Sound business environment. Obviously, this project, based on Rotary DEI principles, advocating for the right to services, right to the city, challenges the slums as nuisance discourse, and the mindset of the courts and the DDA. Uh, the project opened opportunities for marginalized slum dwellers to participate in skills training to meet national and international standards, contributing to the sound business environment of the Delhi industry. Uh, and then, of course, in gender inclusiveness, including women in roles in service industry, in hospitality, retail, in-home businesses, and the international skill centers uh, will offer training and certification benchmarks to international standards, enabling immigration as a possibility for the young and or adventurous. Equitable distribution of resources. Uh, this is fairly obvious. Based on DEI principles of Rotary, again, we're advocating rights to these services, the training that slum dwellers are entitled to, their right to the city, and challenging the slums as nuisance discourse. Uh, the project will not eliminate patronage politics, but it will create awareness among slum residents uh, and agencies of rights to skill enhancement programs and job placement services. The Rotary intervention with the Pradhans, Costum Parekta Manch, NGOs, the women's group, challenges predatory clientism that demands payment for services. And then the inclusion of women, 600 women in the program, working with their roles in industry and home life. High levels of human capital. The waste in human capital that is embodied by the slums of Delhi is hard to even talk about. As you saw from the community needs assessment, most of the people in the slums are currently engaged in very marginal occupations, some of them as gardeners, uh, but basically, not landscape gardeners, but, people who rake and people who collect the leaves and throw them away, and, people who walk the dog. Uh, the very lowest level of retail and hospitality, the people who set up for banquets, the maids in the hotel rooms, uh, jobs like that, if they have jobs at all. Many of the youth are unemployed, and especially after COVID-19. This project opens opportunities to participate in skills training, to meet international and national standards, connect with better employment. Uh, by including 600 women, we open opportunities for them to engage, in many cases for the first time, and to integrate their work life with their family life. The international skills centers offer an opportunity for youth to temporarily immigrate to get better jobs, uh, possibly in Dubai, possibly in Malaysia, possibly in Hong Kong, uh, helping with visas and passports. Low levels of corruption. Uh, One of the major goals of this project is to establish a clean interface, a window between the slum residents and documentation agencies and skills enhancement programs. So instead of going to a local politician or a local, wheeler and dealer to gain access to these programs or to establish their own residency requirements, they will go through the Rotary program, through the Global Grant program. Skilled certification to industry, it will reduce exposure of slum dwellers to corrupt practices and access to menial jobs. The International Skills Centers will provide certification to international programs, and the Global Grant Stewardship requirements will demonstrate international standards at all levels of interaction with the agencies, with the CBOs and the NGOs. Again, an example of how the slum dwellers can uh, demand their rights. In this case, this is a program in 2018 to demand uh, to oppose amendments to the anti-corruption laws and demand operationalization of anti-corruption laws in the slums. Again, whether the demonstration was successful or not, it does indicate the willingness, the ability of the slum dwellers to engage in collective action for change. Uh, Finally, how systems thinking works in this graph. Uh, these are only a few examples. As I said before, and as I've been trying to indicate throughout the discussion, uh, these pillars of peace are intended to work together, to work in interaction with each other, uh, and to provide an overall, at least an overall nudge in the direction of greater positive peace. So a few examples: inclusion of slum residents in government and NGO skills enhancement and job placement programs will also improve their access to better jobs. It will also increase reliable data on the JGCs, on the slums, the UACs, the resettlement colonies. Uh, Free flow of information. It will also contribute to better survey information ahead of, in case there is in situ redevelopment or more inclusion, good governance, equitable distribution, free flow of information, skilled certification to industry or even international standards will reduce exposure to corrupt practices. So that is the low corruption pillar, and lead to better jobs and higher levels of human capital. So at systems thinking at work in this global grant, more systems thinking, inclusion of slum dwellers through the government ID documentation program will increase the pressure on the DUSIB to improve access of slum residents to other public services denied to JGCs, uh, clean water, home toilets and/or well-maintained public sanitation and hospital services. It will also reduce vulnerability to corrupt practices and access to public services and government services. I'd like to say a word about monitoring and evaluation and using the IEP pillars of positive peace as an indicator for monitoring and evaluation. So inclusion of slum residents through government ID documentation. We'll be looking at the percentage of slum residents fully documented. We'll be looking at the number and percentage of slum residents actually enrolled in government training and job search programs. We'll be looking at the number and percentage of participants completing the training, both our training and that of the government programs. We'll be looking at the number and percentage of participants completing immigration orientation and immigrating for job placement. And we'll be doing disaggregated results for male and female participants. So, and how do the 8 pillars and the global grant working in this context contribute to the sustainable development goals of the United Nations? This is a very important indicator for me. I am very much dedicated to the sustainable development goals in the United Nations. So the immediate goal that we're addressing is SDG 16, which is peace, justice, and strong institutions. We are looking at the inclusion of slum residents and right to the city and bridging institutional gaps between government and the poor. We're looking at SDG 1 and 2, no poverty. This, of course, is an overriding goal of the project and most global grants from Rotary Foundation. Goal number 5, gender equality. 600 of our participants out of 1,000 are women, and we have an emphasis on women's roles in work and family life once they have completed the training. Uh, SDG 8, decent work and economic growth. Of course, that is the central goal of the project. SDG 10, reducing inequalities. Of course, uh, that's related to the IEP goal of more equitable relations. And finally, sustainable cities and communities. As I said before, 50% of Delhi's population is in illegal housing, with current policies advancing gentrification and elimination of the poor rather than elimination of poverty. This is not a sustainable model of governance or of running the city. And this global grant will nudge the government of India and the government of Delhi toward more sustainable models of developing the city. Um, so thank you very much for your patience. I know that this has been a very long presentation, but I hope I have demonstrated how the global grant uh, fits the uh, Rotary Foundation Peace and Conflict Resolution area of focus, and how it works in a systematic way with the Institute for Economics and Peace, 8 pillars of positive peace. Thank you again for listening, and thank all of those who have supported this global grant. Thank you.